Hello, and welcome to our presentation on the meta-analysis of human personality and robot acceptance. Robots are becoming more and more prevalent, and they are projected to become even more so as time progresses, and the technology becomes more accessible. A major hurdle, however, revolves around the acceptance of these physically embodied intelligent machines. Specifically, it is unclear if humans will accept robots. If they fail to do so, robots will ultimately underwhelm us. They will fail to reach their full potential, and they really won't make life easier for anybody. They won't increase efficiency, and performance will stay the same or be worse. However, if they are accepted, we expect things to improve as this technology becomes accessible and used. After all, acceptance sort of as a precursor to use in many cases. One of the major predictors that has come up of late of acceptance is humans' different personality traits. Some personalities have been seen in the HRI literature as accepting robots more readily than other personalities. But there's a sort of a dispute here. There's some conflict within this literature. Some of the reviews that we've seen have shown that that's not always the case. And none of these reviews have looked at this relationship in a meta-analytic way. So they haven't done these sort of systematic quantitative investigations of the existing data on the matter. This study is motivated primarily in the same way as these other studies, but we want to take this meta-analytic approach so that we can really take stock of everything that's been done and see where we stand in relation to the question of, can human personality be used to predict robot acceptance? And if so, when? So, the literature has said that it does sometimes it doesn't. There are conflicts. A great way to look at this when you have a lot of literature on a topic is through meta-analysis. And that's what we do here. So a quick sort of note on what meta-analysis is. Meta-analysis is useful in cases like this, as it can combine information present in multiple studies and can surpass the limitations of any single study to estimate an overall relationship across them. To accomplish this, you first need a really good review. Next up, I'll go over all of the different review approaches that we took and our search criteria. So for this paper, we adopted a wide search strategy focusing on the search engines of Google Scholar, the ACM Digital Library, and IEEE Explorer. Searches in these databases were conducted on a page-by-page basis, where we moved through pages progressively until a page of results failed to include any studies that met our initial inclusion criteria. In short, papers needed to be classified as articles or other academic works, be published in some form of English. So even if the original was written in non-English language, we wanted to be able to judge its criteria, and we didn't have any non-English speakers on the team, so they needed to be written in English. And we needed them to contain the terms robot and the terms personality either in their abstracts or in their titles. The search terms that we used across these different databases were different combinations of the word human, the word robot, the word interaction, the phrase HRI, and the word personality. Once the initial batch of papers was selected, we adopted a 3-stage screening process. This process started out at title screening and moved on down to full text, and was progressively stricter as we moved from sort of title to abstract to full text. We detail this a lot in the paper. A good chunk of the paper is methodology, so if you're curious, I encourage you to check it out in there. All things said, we were able to extract 26 unique studies that looked at this subject and reported data that was useful for meta-analysis. The meta-analytical approach that we took was the psychometric approach. This takes into account reliabilities where they are reported. Reliabilities were imputed from existing reliability data using the PsychMeta package in R where they were not reported. Our meta-analysis focused on correlations and calculated these by converting from a range of different values. So, not every study reported a correlation or effect sizes, Cohen's D's, things like that. So we had to do some conversion to be able to sort of tease out these effect sizes from some studies. These conversion formulas and our approaches for doing that are also detailed in the paper, and I think that we have individual formulas and equations there too for anyone who is curious how we went about that. So moving on to our results, we see that human personality did appear to significantly impact robot acceptance. Across all the 26 studies and 1,611 participants those studies contained, we saw a significant mean effect size. So we can conclude from that human personality does seem to impact robot acceptance. One thing to note, however, is that in our heterogeneity tests, we showed that variance was present, and there are likely moderators at play here, which might help explain some of that inconsistency within the existing literature. Based on what information was reported in all these studies, we investigated the potential moderators of personality traits, age, gender diversity, global region, and type of task. Starting out with personality traits, we found that agreeableness, extroversion, and openness appeared significant in our analysis, which provides some support for their importance. There was no clear evidence, however, supporting the relationship between neuroticism and conscientiousness. For neuroticism, the high sample sizes supported the argument that this trait may not be related to robot acceptance in general. For conscientiousness, however, we see a small sample size, as only 5 studies were conducted on this that utilized this personality trait, and across those they only had 123 participants, which wasn't that much. So it's possible that these results were non-significant due to a small sample size. Ultimately, more research is needed to understand the relationship between conscientiousness and acceptance, but it is not clear if such additional studies are warranted for neuroticism. Moving on to age, we examined things across 3 different age groups. We found the relationship between personality and robot acceptance was only significant in the 18 to 24-year-old age group. Specifically, results indicated that the positive correlation between personality and robot acceptance was only significant for studies with samples ranging in that sort of 18 to 24 range there. And it should be noted that a lack of studies really prevented us from examining this by personality traits, so we couldn't really go too deep here, just because there wasn't really enough to dig into. Moving on to gender diversity, the technology acceptance literature has frequently highlighted the importance of gender diversity in samples. Based on these findings, we sought to determine whether or not there was any support for gender diversity between the samples across the literature that we had. Gender diversity in this case was pretty much was it a majority of women, was it a majority of men, or was it an even distribution? High gender diversity would be an even distribution, so that's that 50%, split, perfect data collection. You got half men, half women, and so that would be the high case. The medium case was a little bit more men than women, a little bit more women than men, and the low case was all men or all women. So we stratified things out that way. Across these different strata, we found that personality was only a predictor of robot acceptance in studies with high and medium levels of gender diversity. One thing to note at the end of the day with this, though, is that no studies reported any genders beyond sort of this binary male-female. So that's just something that we observed in the literature as well. For global region, we found that global region was a significant moderator, at least in the case of Europe. Positive correlations between personality and robot acceptance were only significant for studies within samples based in Europe. Samples in Asia appeared to approach significance, but North America didn't. There was a few studies that were not in Europe, Asia, or North America, but these studies numbered less than 3, and thus we couldn't really draw conclusions based on them, at least in the meta-analytical tradition that we're adopting for this analysis. Finally, we look at the moderator of task type. We had 3 different sort of types of tasks that we classified from descriptions of the tasks given to subjects across studies. Across these, we saw that a significant relationship was present between human personality and robot acceptance only in cases where the task was physical manipulation. No other task type had significant effects, and the influence task type was numbered under 3, so we didn't look at it here. But we did find that the physical manipulation work, physical manipulation tasks were sort of facilitating this significant relationship. So it's possible that task type might act as a moderator as well. Ultimately, at the end of the day, there were several different gaps in the existing literature. Specifically, there's a need for more studies that go beyond the big 5 personality traits and examine other personality traits. There's this dynamic of dominance that could be an interesting one to explore. And some papers have looked at these, but most have really, really focused on the big 5 personality traits. So going beyond that would be encouraged. There's also a need to examine adults over 65. This population was largely absent from samples. And finally, there was a need to sort of go out and do studies in places that were not Europe or North America, and sort of expand into different sort of global regions. So summing up all of our findings, we found that the results of this meta-analysis indicated a significant impact of human personality on the acceptance of robots. We also saw that moderators were present. Specifically, these moderators were personality, in the case of extroversion, agreeableness, and openness, age for those between 18 to 24, gender diversity in cases where it was high or medium, global region where the region samples were collected from Europe, and finally task type where the tasks were physical or manipulation tasks. So without further ado, I think we'll leave it there, and we'll open up discussion and have a Q&A about our findings, our methodology, or anything else you're curious about this paper.